Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and welcome to another book review. I burned through this book way faster than I thought I was going to, and I'm glad for it, because it means that means it was as good as I remember. Because today we are talking about the High Druid of Shannara, Jarka Ruus. Come on, there we go. There we go. Had to deal with the ring light there, but yes, had to deal with the. But anyway, yes, Jarka Ruus. So first comment on this. I really like the name. I love Jarka Ruus. I like that. So remember I think it was the Elf Queen of Shannara, where I was complaining about the fact that, that you had two elves named Barsimon Aridio and Eton Shart, or Eton Shart, depending on how you pronounce that. I still think it should be Eton, but that's just horrible when you think about it. So we're not gonna eat any Shart. And I was talking about how Terry Brooks, wanted to create this race that was supposed to be ancient and around since the time of Fairy and everything, but he never put any real effort into, trying to he never really put any real effort into trying to create a civilization and a race with history, and the end result is that you have a lot of elves with really, really stupid names. And honest to goodness, honest to goodness, the saying the word like Jarka Ruus, I don't know, there's something about it. Just, if you haven't yet, say it out loud to yourself. Just real quick while you're watching the video, just say it out loud to yourself. And just think about it, Jarka Ruus. That has power and weight to it, It's a word that feels like it has history to it. And it does, of course. But it's a word that actually... It's a pair of words, I should say, that actually feels like it means something. And legitimately, I just wish that Terry Brooks had spent a little more time thinking about these sorts of things when writing his books. I mean, it's all well and good that he made the stories that he did, and he made the stories that he did with the focus that he made the stories with. There's no problem with that. I'm not complaining about that. That's not, there's no issue there. But it's so funny looking at all the little ways as I read through the saga, how Terry Brooks could have done a little bit better of a job, not a dob, a little bit better of a job, just kind of thinking about the things that kind of underpin his universe and the consistency of his universe. Something else that was bothering me, actually, honestly, when I was reading this book, is that I kind of realized that Terry Brooks really clearly has no established rules in his head for how his magic works. How the druids wield magic, how non-druids wield magic, how demons wield magic, how everyone wields magic. There's no real rules. It kind of just does what it needs to do when it needs to do it. There's enough constraints that there's enough constraints on it that the magic doesn't just do whatever, whenever, but kind of like I was talking about, how are the Elfstones being used against technology, or how is the Sword of Shannara get people through a bunch of grinding ice pillars, in the Voyage of Jarl Shannara. And it kind of felt that here again too. It's nothing too bad or anything, but for example, Grianne Omsford created the Scry Chamber in Paranor, which becomes a very important tool for people. For the rest of this series and the future, and for the last three series after this one. It becomes important. I think it's oh, okay. But how does that magic work? What governs that magic, etc. I mean, I'm not asking for a complex explanation, but we've never seen magic like this before. Maybe a little something wouldn't hurt to try and help people better grasp the, kind of help people grasp why people are, more precisely why people are able to do it, not necessarily that it happens. And then this series in particular, in the prior book series, the druids are always shown using the druid fire, shooting the flames from their hands, and then using all sorts of other utility powers, things like not telekinetic, telepathic communication, and you and like sensing magic and sensing the environment, stuff like that. But in this one, Aaron Alesidil, Kyber Alesidil, Tarek Mold, Shadearu, they're using all sorts of crazy magics out of nowhere. Like, you're just like, oh, okay, the Druids have all this power all of a sudden. Where did this come from? Why didn't Alanon or Walker ever use this before? Hello? And it's not to say we haven't seen, like, the forging of the Sword of Shannara, for example, is a magical process, right? But I just wish there was a little more something that I could, like, kind of latch onto to better understand to better understand the magic in the world of Shannara. It's nothing that makes me mad, nothing that makes me disappoints me, it's something that ruins the experience. It's just, I wish there was a little bit more I could, like, kind of latch onto, That being said, though, this is an absolutely fantastic book. It's funny, because, like, for the first half, I actually thought the book was going a little bit slow. No, I didn't think it was, like, a bad thing necessarily, but I don't think it was a good thing either. I thought the pace just felt a little off to me. But then finally, when we're introduced to, like, Penderin and everything, we kind of finally get, like, a real sense of, the momentum kind of shifts. And even though it's still on the slow side, you get a little excitement, a little bit of interest in everything, and you start really seeing in this book, like, kind of what Terry Brooks is trying to do different. Because something I really noticed while reading it was that Terry was doing his darnest to, like, really work on his characters. There's a lot of character work in this, a lot of trying to understand characters, and a lot of little character moments that I can't even say I really saw in many of the earlier books. The Heritage of Shannara is probably the only series I feel like that I've read so far that really tries to establish, like, solid, definitive characters, personalities, behaviors, and carry them through to the end. And here you have it again. And oddly enough, Terry tries a lot of, like, comedic character writing in this one. I noticed, like, the sort of like Tagwin being extremely grumpy and Kyber being kind of, like, a little bit over assertive, and a lot of it's played for laughs. Like, remember, I read this at work, so I found myself laughing out loud a couple of times at the book. Fortunately, I was alone in the break room, but I found myself laughing at this book on more than a couple of occasions. Because it's just like, oh, okay, he's actually trying for funny, and it's working. The interplay between Tagwin and Pen Omsford is really, really entertaining, and the furtive, suspicious behaviors of Weka Dart, played against Grianne Omsford, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, is really well executed, and I like that he kind of, like, tried to experiment with trying to make characters that are, like, a lot more interesting is the wrong word, because most of his characters are interesting, but it's, like, more personable, I guess. They have, like, personalities that you can kind of attach to and understand on a more human level. They're not just ciphers for magical power or talismans or whatever. They are, in fact, their own people who are not always acting who are not always acting in reaction to their adventure, but sometimes are just acting like people. I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool and really smartly written. And that's probably my favorite part of the book. The characters just kind of being, like, individuals. Complex individuals who behave, like, sometimes mostly serious, but sometimes, like, the serious just slips because they're out of their element. I think one of my favorite moments, actually, is when Aaron Alesidil is dying, and I must admit, actually, I'm not mad about it. I'm mostly sad about it. But there's a little thing that bothers me about Aaron's death, and that's mostly because it's Brooks falling back on his tried and true trope of is falling back on his tried and true trope of killing off the mentor. And I just, it's like Terry, listen, Terry. the mentor character can survive till the end. It's fine. They don't have to die. You know, they can live all the way through and still be there. If you don't want them with the primary heroes, then split them off. You're a writer. You can literally write any way that they could split off from the heroes that would be plausible and conceivable, and you don't have to kill them. You know, because it's like, I don't know. I feel like, especially because Aaron Elesadil dies so young too. You know, the man's like 43 or something. You know, he's not very old at all, relatively speaking. You know, and it's like, but at the same time, his death is a very noble one. It's not like Walker's, which actually legitimately kind of makes me kind of mad, because Walker's death is so empty and bereft of purpose, because the whole point of the expedition is rendered empty and bereft of purpose. Right? Because they can't actually get the knowledge that they're looking for. And so Walker has to die anyway just to save a few people, but for no other gain. Which honestly sucks. Whereas Aaron, like, everything's smaller scale here. Aaron Elesadil's protecting Kyber, Penn, and Tagwin from Tarek Molt and the crew of the Gallifile, the Druid flagship. And he just kind of, and he sacrifices his life to destroy the Gallifile. And honestly, as he's dying, he even quips, basically, I suppose I overestimated my invincibility. Like, the man's like charred, he's been shot several times. He's literally in his death throes. And he has to, and he quips that he overestimated his own invincibility. And I don't know, I love that moment, even though he died. And like I said, I don't feel like he had to die, but I feel like at least his death, unlike, say, Walker's, was far more worthwhile. And, at least we're feeling okay, even if I, on a more technical level, just wish that Terry Brooks would stop doing that all the time. Something else I really, really like from this book, and I remember liking this originally, is sending Rianne to the Forbidding. I thought that was a really good idea. Now, having recently read The Elfstones of Shannara, it's interesting because the Forbidding's actually been retconned, if you didn't realize it, because it might have been a very long time between your reading of one book and the other. But in The Elfstones of Shannara, the Forbidding's actually only basically described as kind of a void. The Dagda Mor, the primary demon from that book, is literally described as viewing the Four Lands through in a void. Like, there's no terrain or anything. There's no indication at all that the Forbidding is a shadow version of the real world. Not shadow version, it's the wrong word, but you know what I mean when I put it that way. There's very little indication of that, though. And honest to goodness, this was actually probably one of his most clever changes. Probably the best change he actually made along the course of the series. Making the Forbidding an actual real place that could be explored and had things in it. I think that's actually really cool. I think it's really amazing. And I think he did it really well too, because it's like you have these recognizable landmarks in the Forbidding, but you don't have but it's not exactly the same. Now, something did bother me when I was reading it this time, though, and that is I'm thinking, if the Forbidding is basically a world that's split off basically from the real world, and they moved in two independent tracks, doesn't that mean that the Forbidding should resemble the old world of Fairy and the regular world? I don't know how to phrase that, actually. But the normal world, the Four Lands, have been shaped by tens of thousands of years of history, including a nuclear war. What does that mean? Does that imply that the environment of the Forbidding changes with the environment outside of the Forbidding? Because there's no way that the Forbidding should actually reflect the world we see, being the Four Lands. It should be much more reflective of the world preceding, World War III. And I actually thought that little bit of oversight was kind of I don't remember if it gets addressed or not. I don't think so, though. Because, imagine what it's like for the demons in the Forbidding when World War III happens and suddenly blast craters appear all over the land, like there's nothing there exploding. It's just suddenly there's a crater in the earth and dirt is getting thrown up all over the place, and they're just like, what the hell's happening? I don't know. I think that this goes back to the thing I was talking about originally, where I wish Terry Brooks thought a little bit more deeply about some of the things he writes, because he definitely didn't think about the implications of the forbidding being a mirror of the real world, or the non-prison world. Whatever. I just, it's not that big of a deal, but it does kind of stare you in the face if you think about it for a second, and it doesn't work all the way. But it's all right for what it is, and honestly, I'm excited to read the next 2 books. But there was one other point I wanted to make. There was one other. Oh yes, the other thing I really enjoyed in this book was the mystery. The mystery plotting was so good, because of course Shadea-Aru, the traitorous druid, conspires to trap Grianne in the forbidding, right? And working together with Sen Dunstan, from Prime Minister of the Federation, continually haunted by his role in killing 200 men with the Morgawr, is actually the source of the liquid night potion, I think it was called, which traps Grianne. And of course, the thing is that the story makes it very clear that there is a lot more going on. But once again, to Terry Brooks' credit, he doesn't tip his hand too early. Instead, he kind of drip feeds us information without ever giving us enough to actually solve it on our own, which is really smart. Because there's a lot of times where mystery plotting occurs where too much information is fed, or the wrong kind of information is fed, and your reader just automatically is like, yeah, I know exactly how this turns out. And which is not necessarily a bad thing, because for people like me especially, there's a lot of satisfaction in figuring out, questions and things that haven't been fully addressed yet, but you're not sure which direction they're going in. But in this case, it's just okay, well, they got this potion. Somehow Sen Dunstan has it, but how does Sen Dunstan have it? What does this have to do with the weird altars up in the Northland and the ruins of the Skull Kingdom? There's all sorts of questions like that are, and you're like, what's going on here? How did this happen? Why did it happen? And as it turns out, of course, it's because of Iridia Aleri, the elf in Shadea-Aru's conspiracy, who somehow, it's never made entirely clear, gone into contact with a demon from the Forbidding, who basically used her emotional and mental instability to his advantage, and manipulated her into basically getting the liquid night potion into the Four Lands, so that a demon could be transferred. Could be transferred to the Four Lands, traded for Grianne. And I just think the whole build up to that was really well done, because it's like again, the story never really tips its hand, and it's very smart in how it deals with it, and I really, really liked that. Speaking of that, though, I'm also something else. One last thing I really, really liked was the Hades horn. When Grianne goes, they're expected to call up the spirits of the druids, and it's like, yeah, there's only one druid you're calling up, and his name is Brona. I thought that was I don't know. I thought it was cool back when I read it, and I think it's cool now. I don't know why, I just think it really is. And I think what I really like is that whereas the shades of the dead, like Al-Anon and Walker and everything, have a tendency to just kind of be like a little evasive, and they tend to like give only half of what everyone needs to know, and they're very vague, right? I like how Brona is a lot more playful is the wrong word, but it's like how he's behaving towards Grianne. I think that that's the way he's behaving towards Grianne. The way she'll ask a question, will go, ask me something more interesting, or she'll ask a direct question after he gives an answer, and it'll be like, you're asking the wrong question, it's like he's supposed to be scary and intimidating, but clearly he has no qualms about like messing with her, basically. And what's weird is that he also gives her more straightforward answers than any other shade has before, which I thought was really interesting. I theorize that on some level, because she was once the Ilsa Witch, he sees some sort of a kindred spirit in her, even if she denies it. And that's what leads him to being more open and forthright with her, compared to your average... your average shade. Wow, I just totally lost that word for 1 second. I said it like 5 times in the past 2 minutes. And I don't know, I thought I like the uniqueness of the interaction. There's a lot of unique things, and I know more unique things are coming. But there's a lot of unique elements and story ideas present in the High Druidess Shannara. And I find it kind of disappointing that this is basically the high watermark of the series, and everything that comes after this is kind of going to be a bit of a letdown. I mean, chronologically comes after this. Because obviously because once this series is done, I'm going to be reading The Word and the Void, and then Genesis, and then Legends. And then coming back to the future, basically. So, I'm really looking forward to it, though. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm almost surprised how much I actually enjoyed this book. I didn't expect it to be better than I remembered, but you know what? I'll take it. I will absolutely take it. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this book review. First time in a long time that I actually managed to say things that were almost completely positive about the book. The things I mentioned that I consider to be negatives were certainly not like anything overpowering or overwhelming to the overall story or anything. It doesn't hurt it in the grand scheme of things. So, you know what? I'm perfectly happy with what I got, with what I read. So, yeah, I'm done for now. I will catch you next time when I talk about the High Druidess Shannara Tanaquil. Until next time, everybody.